Hello, I'm Julia Macbeth, Director of Research and Advocacy for the Celiac Disease Foundation. Thank you for joining us today for the State Advocacy Ambassador training. Celiac Disease Foundation advocates are the engine behind all that we do, pushing forward policy change that now has our federal government recognizing the seriousness of celiac disease and moving towards funding research to accelerate new treatments and one day a cure. The great thing is that you don't need to be an expert in government or policy to be an advocate. All you need is your voice, your passion, and a commitment to making a difference, and we will provide you with the resources and opportunities to make celiac disease the national priority it should be. There will be a short poll at the conclusion of the presentation that you must complete successfully to become a State Advocacy Ambassador. After the poll, we'll conclude with a Q&A session, so please enter your questions and comments in the chat box. Let's start with a brief overview of what being a State Advocacy Ambassador for the Celiac Disease Foundation entails. The word advocacy means public support for or recommendation of a particular cause or policy. As a constituent, you're an indispensable part of our democratic system, and your voice has the power to influence Congress and its actions. The Celiac Disease Foundation advocates for policies on behalf of all people with celiac disease by working with the U.S. Congress, federal agencies such as the National Institutes of Health and Food and Drug Administration, and state governments. Celiac Disease Foundation State Advocacy Ambassadors push forward policy change by educating their elected officials in their home states about the impact of celiac disease on Americans and why diagnosis, treatments, and a cure need to be a national priority. State Advocacy Ambassadors include patients, caregivers, supporters, researchers, and healthcare providers. No previous experience advocating to members of Congress is necessary to be a State Advocacy Ambassador. Everything you need to know to become an effective advocate will be included in this training. So why should you become a State Advocacy Ambassador? Well, the federal government is the largest provider of medical research funding, but up until recently, federal funding for celiac disease has been limited. Following CEO Marilyn G. Geller's testimony before the House Appropriations Subcommittee in April of 2019, Congress directed the NIH for fiscal year 2020 to devote sufficient, focused research to the study of celiac disease. Congress renewed this language for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. This request of the NIH will need to occur every year. In collaboration with our Advocacy Council from Baker Donelson and our Medical Advisory Board, new language for fiscal year 2023 has been drafted. The U.S. Congress and federal agencies are making decisions that impact people with celiac disease that can affect your access to medical care, as well as national funding for medical research. The best way to ensure that your needs are being considered in policy decisions is by sharing your story and explaining how specific policies will affect you or your loved ones. The Celiac Disease Foundation advocates on behalf of people with celiac disease, caregivers, and healthcare providers. The full list of public policy priorities may be found on our website at celiac.org under Get Involved. For current congressional meetings, we're focusing on two asks. The first of these asks is to increase membership for the Congressional Celiac Disease Caucus. In a huge step toward increasing federal government recognition of celiac disease, on August 24, 2021, Congresswoman Betty McCollum launched the Congressional Celiac Disease Caucus. The bipartisan caucus was launched to support federal funding of celiac disease research and to advance legislation that will ease the suffering of those affected by celiac disease. Establishing the Congressional Celiac Disease Caucus is one of the highest legislative priorities for the Celiac Disease Foundation. The caucus will help members of Congress raise awareness of celiac disease, both in their districts and in Washington, as well as amplify the voice of the celiac patient community. Our second ask is that Congress increase funding for the National Institutes of Health for the study of celiac disease. Better treatments and a cure for celiac disease can only be discovered through research. Until recently, celiac disease has not been the focus of research funding by the NIH. Beginning in fiscal year 2020, each year the Celiac Disease Foundation has worked to secure appropriations report language directing the NIH to devote sufficient, focused research to the study of celiac disease. In March of 2021, Celiac Disease Foundation CEO Marilyn Geller testified on patient unmet needs in celiac disease at the NIH Accelerating Progress in Celiac Disease workshop in collaboration with the world's leading researchers. As a result of this workshop, in December of 2021, NIH, for the first time ever, issued a Notice of Special Interest in Celiac Disease to provide dedicated research funding for the study of celiac disease. While these are landmark achievements for the celiac disease community, this request for celiac disease research funding and recognition needs to be renewed on a yearly basis, making your emails to and meetings with your congressional representatives more imperative now than ever. We also ask for your members of Congress to support important legislation for people with celiac disease. The congressionally directed medical research programs supports medical research projects relevant to enhancing the health, care, and well-being of service members, their families, and the American public. Research will benefit the thousands of service members and their families suffering from celiac disease by generating strategies to prevent the disease and providing critical guidance on mitigation efforts affecting readiness. The Gluten in Medicine Disclosure Act is a bipartisan bill that will require manufacturers to label medications intended for human use with a list of ingredients, their source, and whether gluten is present. The Medical Nutrition Therapy Act is a bipartisan bill that will provide coverage of dietitian visits for Medicare beneficiaries with celiac disease and other conditions. The Food Labeling Modernization Act will make it easier and safer for people with celiac disease to make informed purchases of food items by requiring the disclosure of rye and barley ingredients on food labels in addition to wheat in the ingredients list or in the contains statement. As with the Celiac Caucus and NIH funding, we ask that you encourage your congressional representatives to support these initiatives. Members of Congress meet with a number of constituents daily, which can sometimes make it difficult for one person or cause to stand out in their memory. This is part of what makes leave-behinds so important. Leave-behinds are documents you give to the member of Congress or their staff that provide important background information and statistics about the issue you're asking them to take action on. Leave-behinds are a great way to provide a lasting resource that the member of Congress can reference to be reminded of key points to your meeting. These leave-behinds include a double-sided document that contains celiac disease facts and figures on one side and information about the foundation on the other that may be given to both senators and House representatives. Leave-behinds may also include separate documents for senators and House representatives for any current legislation that needs our community support. Celiac Disease Foundation leave-behinds may be emailed or printed and can be found at iadvocate.celiac.org in the Advocacy Toolkit when logged into your iAdvocate account. Those who successfully complete the poll at the end of this training will receive emailed instructions in the following days to create an iAdvocate account. These are the leave-behinds for the Medical Nutrition Therapy Act, introduced by Senators Collins and Peters and House Representatives Kelly and Upton. There is one leave-behind, H.R. 3108, that advocates give to House representatives for the House version of this bill, and another, S1536, that advocates give to senators for the Senate version of this bill. Celiac Disease Foundation constituents sent more than 2,000 emails to their senators and House representatives in support of this bill, gathering 29 co-sponsors. Co-sponsors are senators or House representatives who add their name to a bill indicating their support. Your personal experience with celiac disease is the most powerful advocacy tool you have. Your story gives you a unique perspective on the hardships people with celiac disease face, and it creates an emotional connection to the issue for legislators. The document Crafting Your Story to Affect Change can be found in the Advocacy Toolkit at iadvocate.celiac.org. Use the tips, prompts, and example of an effective story in this document to help you share your story. Remember to relate your story back to our current asks. Here's an example of what an effective story might look like. As a celiac disease patient, the travesty is that the only treatment for my disease, the gluten-free diet, is inadequate and leaves millions of Americans suffering needlessly. I live in constant fear knowing that ingesting just one tiny crumb of gluten will trigger debilitating illness and increase my risk of cancer, heart disease, and additional autoimmune disorders. Please join the Celiac Disease Caucus and support NIH funding of celiac disease research for fiscal year 2023 to develop new treatments, find a cure, and help improve the lives of patients like me. In the Advocacy Toolkit at iadvocate.celiac.org, you'll also find how to set up meetings with your legislators, a resource containing information about your legislators, our sample script for requesting a meeting, and tips to make the most out of your interactions with members of Congress. You can meet virtually with your members of Congress by calling, emailing, setting up a Zoom appointment, or attending a virtual town hall meeting. If your congressional meeting ends up being with a staff member rather than the member of Congress themselves, continue to treat the meeting with the same level of importance you would give to a member of Congress. Staff are often the people members of Congress turn to for advice, making them extremely important in guiding policy decisions. When advocating to members of Congress, it's important to clearly explain the action you would like them to take, the asks. This may seem obvious, but many legislators have said that it can be frustrating to meet with constituents who don't know what they're looking for. Remember to tell your celiac story to explain why our current asks are important to you as someone with celiac disease. Sending a thank you note after your congressional meeting to express your gratitude can help build a professional relationship. See our legislative meeting thank you note template in the Advocacy Toolkit for an example of an effective thank you note. After your congressional meeting, it's important to keep in touch with the member of Congress and their staff through emails, phone calls, and letters to keep celiac disease issues on their mind. Look for positive ways to engage your members of Congress, such as tagging them in social media posts about celiac disease or sharing Celiac Disease Foundation emails with them to show how research is improving the lives of people with celiac disease. One of the simplest steps you can take as a state advocacy ambassador is to email your members of Congress using the Celiac Disease Foundation's Take Action Center on celiac.org. Under the Get Involved menu, click Contact Your Members of Congress or use the URL celiac.org/takeaction and you'll find a pre-written email that you can personalize for each of our current asks of Congress. When you enter your voting address, our advocacy software will display your representatives and email them on your behalf and allow you to share with your networks through social media and email. Once you successfully complete the poll after this presentation, you'll receive an email in the following days with instructions to create an iAdvocate account and download your Celiac Disease Foundation State Advocacy Ambassador certificate. When logged into iAdvocate, you'll find everything you need to be successful in your advocacy efforts, including the Advocacy Toolkit, Celiac Disease Foundation iAdvocate Forum, Advocacy Action Checklist, and Social Media Toolkit. The Advocacy Toolkit contains the resources you need to meet with your members of Congress as a Celiac Disease Foundation State Advocacy Ambassador. The Celiac Disease Foundation iAdvocate Forum connects you with other state advocacy ambassadors so you can build your network and share advocacy experiences. Once you create your iAdvocate login, join the forum and introduce yourself. The Advocacy Action Checklist provides a simple roadmap to help you make the greatest impact in your first steps as a state advocacy ambassador. Download the checklist and share with your network. The Social Media Toolkit contains sample posts with important facts about celiac disease that you can use to educate your followers. Here are some other ways you can show your support. Share our Participate in Research page at celiac.org/participate-in-research with your network. The biggest obstacle in getting a celiac drug to market is recruiting enough patients to participate in clinical trials. Share Foundation social media posts and our monthly e-newsletter to promote awareness of celiac disease as a serious autoimmune disease. Check the gluten-free app for the latest news on all things celiac. Call or email your members of Congress and their staff on a regular basis to stay in touch and build a relationship over time. Those who successfully complete the poll following this training to become a state advocacy ambassador will be eligible for a special opportunity to meet with their member of Congress or their staff. If invited to participate in this special opportunity, please complete the congressional meeting survey that will be sent to you via email. Chosen applicants will be interviewed and trained for upcoming virtual congressional meetings with the Celiac Disease Foundation. To conclude this training, here's a checklist of the next steps you should take as a Celiac Disease Foundation State Advocacy Ambassador. Complete the poll following this training, and when your Celiac Disease Foundation State Advocacy Ambassador email is received, sign up at iadvocate.celiac.org and log in to receive your certificate. Join the iAdvocate forum and start connecting with other advocates near you to plan team meetups to visit members of Congress in your home state and share your efforts. Download the gluten-free app to easily stay informed about our work in recent celiac disease research. Educate your network about celiac disease using posts from our social media toolkit. Learn more about our full list of policy priorities at celiac.org/policy priorities. If invited, complete the congressional meeting survey to apply to meet with your member of Congress or their staff alongside the Celiac Disease Foundation. Thank you for attending the Celiac Disease Foundation State Advocacy Ambassador training. Remember to complete the poll following this training to become a state advocacy ambassador and to be eligible for the special opportunity to meet with your member of Congress or their staff alongside the Celiac Disease Foundation. Those who successfully complete the poll will receive an email in the following days with instructions to create an iAdvocate account. Be sure to also submit any questions you have for the Q&A in the chat box now. We'll get to as many questions as time allows. Thank you for joining the Celiac Disease Foundation State Advocacy Ambassador Network. We look forward to working with you to advocate for a better future for all people with celiac disease.